Hi, I'm Phil Hurd. Today I've got a three-step formula which will help you address the needs of an interviewer and hopefully target your background to those needs so that you can do well on any interview. As you know, Link specializes in the software field, but this will work for any type of interview that you have. So here are the three steps. Number one, first you need to make sure that you understand really what the position is and what the company is hiring for. Now, presumably if you're there on an interview, you've already done your homework and done the basic amount of preparation. Maybe you've checked out the website and done all that other good stuff that you should of course be doing, and maybe you've had a phone screen even with the interviewer already, so you probably know the basics. But when you're sitting down with someone, the best idea that I would say to start your interview, before you get too deep into discussing your own background, I would ask the interviewer, so I know the basics of the position and what you're looking for, but before I go too deeply into my own background, I'd find it very helpful just to get your personal take on what you see the position being and what you see the key things that you're looking for in the position. Now, if you say that, you'll get the interviewer talking a little bit about what they want to hear in the position. And it's interesting, if you have a slate of interviews with the same company and you're going to meet 5 people, sometimes every one of those 5 people has a little bit of a different take on what the position really is in his or her own mind. And that's the subject maybe for another video. That could be a bit of a warning sign that the company doesn't really have an agreement on what they're looking for. But each interviewer, it's good to find out what their individual spin on the position is so that you can make sure you know what they're looking for from you. So that's step one. Before you go too deeply into your own background, make sure you know what your target is that you're shooting for. Step two is make sure you stay on point. You may have all these experiences that you think are very interesting, but if they're not really relevant to what you just learned in part one, you may want to not talk about them very much. And so try to stay on point, talking about those specific areas of your background that you feel are going to be most relevant to what you learned in step one. This is very important. You don't want to wander off the subject. It's also important that you take the time to review your own background maybe the night before the interview. And as simple as that sounds, a lot of people don't do this, and especially if you've been in the workforce for any length of time, but even if you're fairly new, you've already got some experiences and work histories that are laid out on your resume, and it won't hurt to just skim those over. Make sure you're comfortable talking about each place you've been and the responsibilities that you've had, why you did things a certain way, what your involvement is, or was, I should say, in those positions. You don't want to be caught in the middle of an interview stumbling around for words and not really being comfortable with your own background. That comes across poorly. You should also, to the degree that you can, either in advance of the interview is ideal, or at least on the fly after you get the answer in step one, you need to be thinking about areas of weakness in your background where you are likely to come up short in those points that they're looking for in step number one. So for example, maybe you have not quite the right experience that they said they were looking for. Well, you obviously can't manufacture that experience on the spot, and you don't want to lie about it. But for example, in that case, maybe you want to be prepared with some examples and anecdotes from your background of specific times when you've had to come up to speed quickly in a particular area and you were successful in doing that, and then relate that back to the fact that you don't necessarily have the right experience or enough of it, but that you can succeed by coming up to speed quickly. Maybe you have gaps in your work history that you suspect are going to be a problem. You can use your judgment reading the tone of and temperament of the interviewer, whether you think it's worth addressing those proactively or just waiting until you're asked. Sometimes you're better off just waiting, and if it comes up, have a strategy for how to deal with that objection. Other times, if you know that something is obviously going to be a concern to the company, you should have a strategy for dealing with it up front, and you should bring it up in the interview. An example of that might be, Mr. or Mrs. Interviewer, if I were you, I might be concerned about my this in my background or my lack of that, and here's how I propose that I would overcome that sort of thing. The last thing, step three, is to ask for feedback. Now, you want to make sure that you're asking in a way that doesn't set the interviewer up by feeling that if they tell you that they don't think there's a fit, that you're going to pester them until they give in. Because if you come across that way, they're going to shut down and they're not going to want to give you honest feedback. And some interviewers may not be comfortable doing this anyway. However, it's been my experience that if you ask the interviewer at the interview, at the end of the interview, when you're still sitting there face to face with them, and say, so honestly, what do you think? How good do you think the fit is? And you can let them off the hook a little bit. And you can say, it's okay with me if you don't feel there's a strong enough fit, but I would be interested in your candid feedback. What that is great for is sometimes you will get the interviewer saying, well, I'm concerned about this, or I'm a little bit worried about that, or I don't think that there's such a good fit because of this reason. And that gives you an optimum opportunity, if it's a valid concern and if you're interested in the position, to address that right there. And then you don't have to worry about getting a rejection later and having to circle back. So in closing, those are 3 steps to a process that I think will make you a much more effective candidate in an interview. Step 1, again, just to refresh, make sure you understand what that particular interviewer is looking for in the hire that they make. Step 2, make sure you're familiar with your own background, both the strengths and the weaknesses as they relate to what you learn in part 1, and be proactive about addressing those and make sure that the interviewer grasps the connections. Don't assume that they're just going to put the dotted lines and connect them together. You make sure that you say, these are my strengths and this is how they're going to relate to that. These are my weaknesses and here's how I would overcome them in this position. And step 3, ask for feedback. You have nothing to lose. Even if they say it's not a good fit, you have an optimum chance to rebut any concerns, or address, I should say, any concerns that they have right there, which is your best chance of overcoming them. So once again, I'm Phil Hurd from Lynx. I hope this 3-step process helps you in your interviewing. And if you're looking for a job in the software world in the greater Boston area, please take a look at our website, lynxinc.com. We'd love to work with you. Thanks, and see you next time.